One look at Cana and at first you might think something along the lines of, oh yeah, she'd totally be considered sexualized. Or perhaps more bluntly, how the heck can any feminist give her a decent score at all? Well, I am here to tell you how. Before I can even begin, I need to give y'all some basic character design 101. It's generally agreed upon by many professionals and non-professionals, including those from the following YouTube videos, that an ideal character design for any given character needs to tell you something about said character. Basically, in most cases, you want to be able to look at a character and get a good idea of what their personality is like, what their hobbies are, something about their backstory, and or their role in the story. Of course, there are exceptions. There may be cases where a designer may intentionally design a character to deceive the audience with an incorrect first impression. For the moment, let's assume that we aren't ready for that yet and stick with the basics. To make someone look crazed or maniacal, you might put swirls into their eyes. Or to express arrogance, you might give them a big, bold fashion statement like this Koopa's hair. Perhaps the color palette of their clothes may line up with their favorite kind of Pokemon. Perhaps the kind of clothes they wear could give clues as to their social standing or where they're from. The list can go on and on. One of the most misunderstood concepts of feminist-inspired analysis is the idea of gender markers. And granted, it is near impossible to understand how they actually work without a very thorough grasp of basic character design principles. Keep in mind that I'm going to be talking about gender markers as they work in complex designs and complex designs primarily. How gender markers work in abstract and simplistic designs is an entirely different beast altogether, and doesn't even really have an easy solution, other than maybe putting a mustache on Pac-Man, or something to at least dish out equal opportunity marking. Only for the internet to probably start calling him Stash Man, which would defeat the entire point of stashing him in the first place. But I digress. While there's nothing inherently wrong with using gendered objects on a female character design, such as a bow, the color pink, or even boobs, or whatever, the character first and foremost, above all else, needs to be able to express a solid identity besides just their gender. Sometimes more pointless gender markers can take up space that could be used for more interesting character design choices. Or the object itself, or how said object is being presented, may clash with what the character is supposed to be like. There are indeed cases where very intentionally specific objects that happen to also be gender signifiers are used in a character design, which can be a valid approach. But to see where exactly gender markers can go wrong, let's look at an example, such as the textbook-worthy example, Wendy Koopa of the Koopalings from the Mario games. Not only is she wearing nothing but blatantly obvious gender markers, but they all even clash with each other. And in some of the more recent games, she moves like a ballerina for some reason, which is yet another seemingly random detail that makes no sense. Like, is she into magic? Or is she girly? Or is she supposed to be mature? Or an obnoxious egomaniac, or she's supposed to be graceful or athletic. The only thing that really seems to tie all of her aesthetic character elements together is her gender. And all in all, for the Mario universe, it's just way too much information in general compared to her brothers that each have only 3 to 4 recognizable visual elements at most. I've already briefly mentioned it with Wendy's ballerina movements, but one more design concept that we need to be aware of before we talk about Cana is posing and animation. Posing is the way a character is drawn in one particular frame. Animation is basically, as Danielle Floyd describes it, a series of poses. Lo and behold, posing and animation is also supposed to express something about that character. Among other things, like obviously looking good, and that the pose should clearly communicate what a character is doing without explanation, even in silhouette, etc. So let's take this info and look at Cana from the fairy tale anime. For the purpose of this analysis, I'm going to look at how Cana is presented in the first season of the anime, and the first season primarily. The events of later seasons may be briefly discussed towards the end of the video, but I'm focusing on how she is presented in season 1 in order to simplify things. Around the time Fairy Tail transitioned over to Season 3, there was some subtle changes in the art style and in how Cana and other female characters were presented. For starters, there were many frames where female characters' boobs were significantly larger and or more prominently presented than they were in Season 1, and it seems like I'm not the only one who's noticed. Cana is almost always presented drinking alcohol, and her pose almost always accentuates laziness, slothfulness, or occasionally annoyance, and whatever other emotion she might happen to be feeling at that moment. Her visual design makes sense because, basically, and let's be clear, people are more than welcome to disagree with me on this point, and by extension this entire video, since this analysis hinges a lot on my interpretation of this detail, but she's a lazy drunk who's too lazy to put on a shirt in the morning. Her pants are loosely belted, and her hair is unkempt, at least compared to the hair of the other female members in the guild. Also, you may or may not already know that she's wearing some things called capris, and according to myself and my mom, these are very comfortable and often the clothing of choice for women while they are not in public. Or, as it likely is in Cana's case, we just don't care. She is rarely put into poses that are solely for the purpose of fan service, unless she's in a beauty contest and wants to win some cash, which happened I think once in the first season. Everything about the animation, posing, voice acting, and her visual design are kept faithful to her character. That just so happens to never wear a shirt. And in case you are wondering, yes, as a woman myself, I can state that, in my opinion at least, putting on a jacket without putting on a shirt is a very plausible thing for an exceptionally lazy woman to do. Although I would have to also confirm that this action shows that Cana gives absolutely zero craps about what society thinks of her, is pretty comfortable about at least this particular aspect about herself, and it would also make much more sense for most people if it was very hot out. This is an example of appropriate design with a character that just so happens to be sexy as a result, done very well. But this is not to say that you can take just any abnormally sexualized character and try to justify it after the fact, because that can easily go very wrong. Take Starfire as she appears in the Red Hood and the Outlaws 52 reboot. One of the defenses for her design is that she is an alien that did not grow up with Western gender norms, which kind of makes sense when it comes to her attitude about sex. But on the flip side, this detail is, first of all, to put it bluntly, way too convenient in how it is portrayed. She literally has sex with both of the main male characters and starts an awkward I slept with your girl joke within the first half of the first few chapters of the first book. And as far as I have read, this is the only interesting culture clash there really is to her. Any character, no matter how solid or even conservatively dressed, can end up getting dangerously close or even crossing the line from just being sexy to, dare I say, objectified, with exploitive posing, camera angles, or in this particular case, most prominently writing. As for Starfire's basic visual design, the she's an alien defense doesn't even hold up very well, looking at how her outfit does not seem to serve any evident comfort or practical purpose related to being an alien. I mean, seriously, if anyone can, do a analyze commentary on this, outfit, or whatever it even is, I'm all ears. If she was wearing a two-piece or a bodysuit that gave her better mobility or something, I would understand. But this, just, what? If she was really an alien, unfamiliar with Western Earth culture, then why does she bother to wax the hair from her nether regions? And why does sex and memories about sex seem to be the only traits she has that go against Western Earth norms? To be clear, I did only read the first 2 books, and in the second book I ended up skimming the bits focused on the male characters, because to be perfectly 100% honest, I am running out of time and budget, so if there is something else interesting that comes up later on that makes her outfit make more sense or whatever, oops. But regardless, my example here still stands. To top it all off, the sexy alien trope is just a trope that needs to die anyways. Because first of all, there are so many other ways to design aliens. I mean, you can literally do anything. Second of all, I actually don't want to reject the idea that an alien who happens to dress provocatively could be a viable design result, but I also want to caution against mistaking provocative clothing with a lax attitude about the act of sex itself. Because the two things don't always go hand in hand.
And let's not forget she also beat up Loki for trying to hit on her. He totally deserved it, though.
Cana is also a multifaceted character throughout the series. In Season 1, when her friends and home were in trouble, she surprises the audience by being one of the front runners in the fight, and in the absence of the main characters, even becomes the leader. And she becomes very emotional when the guild hall actually gets destroyed, revealing her strong emotional connection to the place, which eventually gets explained in future events. Cana's character arc in the following seasons is one that rules the death of a parent, a dad who's alive but never around, one or two brief mentions of romance, depression, and long-term confidence issues, all into one cohesive whole. One of the few flaws in her design is that you have to wonder how she manages to drink so much alcohol without gaining weight. Then again, there are some things that can be left up to the suspension of disbelief. And more importantly, the lack of body type diversity is a known issue with anime as a whole, rather than being specific to Cana Alberona. So I'll just leave you with that. Okay, so she looks sexy, but there's nothing inherently wrong with that. And while a valid claim might be that Fairy Tail already has more than its fair share of sexy ladies, in my opinion, Cana's design at least, and the portrayal of said design, especially early in the anime, is pretty darn classy about it. Yep, I just put a hopeless drunk and classy in the same sentence. Whoop-de-doo, okay, I'm done. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for more content. And consider contributing to my Patreon if you're able. And for more updates and additional content, you can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter as seen on the screen. That's all for now.